In the previous video, you saw how geometry can be observed on the Earth, the geometric shapes. So what we're going to be doing right now is we're going to see how you can use geometry to make certain conclusions about certain aspects of shapes. In this case, we're going to be talking about circumference. So we're going to look to see how you can get the circumference of a circle using a rectangle, angles, and arcs. Okay, this is going to be a 3-step process, and each step's going to have a video. So let me show you how we're going to get this done. So we're going to start off by creating a circle. And what you need to do is figure out roughly where the center of this piece of paper is, and you can use a ruler to do that, or you can fold the paper, whatever works. But let's say you figure out the center, and the center is roughly right about here. Okay. Now you're going to make a circle from this center point. So usually people use like a compass to do this. So get your hand on a compass. In this case, there's different types of compass, but in this one, you put the needle right there at the center point, and then you would move the pencil around that center point. It'll form pretty much like a really almost perfect circle. So I realize this isn't a perfect circle, but I gotta work with what I got here. Okay, so imagine this is pretty much a really good circle. You guys would have a much better one than I do here. All right, so here's what we want to do. We want to figure out the circumference of the circle. Now you can just measure that, and there's ways we can do that. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But there's actually a couple of ways you can do this using geometry, very kind of simple techniques to figure out the circumference. So the first part you're going to do is you're going to draw a line going from from the center of the circle, kind of outward towards the edges of the circle. Okay, I would recommend for this first line, it has to be parallel to the bottom of the page or parallel to the top of the page. One way you can do that is if you line your ruler up. If you line your ruler up kind of against the edge of the paper, so it kind of forms like it lines up right here along this edge, you should have pretty much a line that's parallel to the bottom. So so I have my line drawn right there. Once again, it will go from the center outward. I know this doesn't look that great, but gotta work with it. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to draw another line going from the center outward. Okay, now in this case, we're going to do the line less than a 90 degree, so it's not going to be like an L kind of shape. It's going to be less than a 90-degree angle. Okay, so it'll look a little like this, right? Almost kind of looks like Pac-Man. All right, so what we're going to do next is we are going to determine this angle right here. Okay, now this is the angle between this line and this line right here. We're going to figure out what this angle is. So the way we do that is by using this tool called a protractor. So I zoomed in a little. You're going to use this protractor. So what you do with the protractor is you get this little center point. Okay, you get this center point right here where there's like a little hole in the protractor, and you got to put it over your center point here, or in other words, where your angle kind of begins. Right, so the angle kind of starts at this little intersection right here, so I put that hole over that. And then you got this line right here on your protractor, this line right there. You're also going to have a line on this edge and this edge. Okay, now you want to make sure that that line matches the line that you drew here, that parallel line that we drew. Okay, so I know once again it doesn't match perfectly here. That's because my line's not straight, but on your example, it should match up really well. Okay, so we got our kind of our starting line right here, and what we want to do is we're going to see what the angle is from this line to the top line right here. Okay, so how do you read this protractor? Well, you have your degrees right here. We're going to focus on the ones at the bottom here. So this would be our 0. This bottom line here would be our starting point. And then you see a 10 degree here, 20 degree, 30 degree, 40, 50, etc. Okay, so each of these lines is has like a little, here's your 10-degree line right here. That matches with this line right here, so that's still technically your 10. So this is your 20-degree line right here, right? And that matches with this one right here, so that's your 20. So here's your 10, right? And then here's your 20, etc., right? 30, 40. In between each of these kind of major points, you see a bunch of tiny little lines, okay? Each of those equals 1 degree. So if right here, if this is my 20 right here, right? That first line right above that, that would be 21, right? The next line would be 22, 23, 24, and then the kind of 25 right there, all the way up until you get to right here, which is your 30. Okay, so that's my 30. And if you look pretty closely at my image right here, you'll see that it's right before the 40. So the angle roughly here is around 39 degrees. Okay, so we got an angle of about 39 degrees right here. All right, so that's step number one, pretty simple. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get how the actual length of this arc right here. Okay, so that little region is called the arc. Now, if you go around the whole circle, we call that the circumference, right? But a little piece of that circle, we would call that the arc. So the way you're going to measure that is you're just going to get your ruler, okay, and then go from the beginning all the way to the end of that arc right there. Okay, so I know it's a curved line, so it's a little tricky on a ruler, but just try your best to get it as well as you can so that it kind of matches the best. So in this case, that arc is roughly about 5 centimeters. Okay, so this arc equals 5 centimeters. And for this activity, yeah, we're gonna do everything in centimeters. Okay, so that's how you measure your arc and your angle. Okay, now we can get the circumference. So the way this works is we're going to use proportions. Okay, so essentially, if you think about how many degrees it takes to go around a circle, we say that is 360 degrees. Okay, now our angle is only 39 degrees. Okay, now it turns out that this relationship here is proportional to the circumference over the arc. And that makes sense because this angle, the angle from this line to here, right, is 39 degrees. And that 39 degrees is out of 360. Well, that angle right there on the circle itself is your arc, right? That arc is 5 centimeters, and that 5 centimeters is it's the length compared to the whole circumference, right? The circumference of that circle. Okay, so that's your circumference compared to your arc, right? So they have a relationship. The circumference is the whole circle, the length around the whole circle, just like 360 degrees is the degrees around the whole circle. And this little piece here, this 39 degrees, is your angle between these two lines, just like your arc is the distance in between those two lines. So they're proportional, they're related to each other. So we know that our arc is 5 centimeters. Now, if we want to figure out the circumference, all you have to do is we have to isolate the circumference. We have to get this value right here by itself. Okay, but as you can see, it's attached to this 5 centimeters here, right? They're kind of connected, circumference over 5. So what we actually got to do here is a little algebra, but it's pretty simple. If I multiply this side by 5 centimeters, it cancels out. My 5 centimeters cancels out, which is great. Now I have circumference by itself. But whatever I do on the right side, I have to do on the left side. Okay? And there you go. Now I can get my circumference. There's a couple of ways you can do this, but quite simply, when you're going to figure it out, all you got to do is maybe do what's in the parentheses first, in this case 360 divided by 39. Okay? You're going to get that number. This number, then you're going to multiply it, right, times the 5. So you're going to get that number multiply it times 5, and there's your circumference, okay? In this case, it would be 46 centimeters. So my circumference, remember all this stuff equals my circumference. So my circumference equals 46 centimeters. Okay, so that's the first set of notes. Now what you're going to do in the assignment is you're going to do this exact same process, but for a different size circle and a different size angle. So you can make another circle, it can be smaller, it can be bigger, and your angle has to be different than your original angle. Okay, now the example I gave here, your circle probably didn't have an angle of 39 degrees, right? Because you did a different one. But I want you to, that's going to be your notes. I want you to do another example on your assignment page where you're going to work out a similar problem but using a different angle.